Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. We have a lot on our plate today, so let's get started with a look at today's highlights. The government has set out a new set of measures to create more jobs and boost employment for young people as Korea's youth unemployment rate continues to remain high. To help the country's tourism sector, which has been struggling from China's ban on package tours to Korea, the government plans to release extra funds and support measures. These stories and more coming right up. So today, the Korean government has rolled out measures to help boost the youth unemployment rate. But given that this is not the first set of policies issued so far, there are concerns about the efficacy of these attempts. For more, we have our Shin Se-min joining us in the studio. Welcome, Se-min.
Hello to you.
All right, so what do these new measures include?
So the government, as you said, had introduced a fresh set of measures, but many are already looking at these with a doubt in their eyes. Some have labeled them a quick fix following recent data that has painted a pretty bleak picture out of the youth job market. Now, we learned yesterday that the number of young Koreans who have in effect given up looking for jobs hit a 4-year high last month, reaching 362,000, up over 11,000 compared to the month before. So to go over some of the details, the plan rolled out by the government today says that it'll actively begin supporting those with startup companies, in particular men, by delaying the time they're required to enter their mandatory military service and easing some of the burden of debt for those who have failed in their startup attempts. It also plans to help those struggling to find their career path and assist them in landing jobs through related programs.
So how effective have these measures been? I mean, it's not the first time that we've heard about these measures. So, I mean, will they actually help to alleviate some of the problems?
Well, before we get to that, today's announcement is a third of its kind in terms of comprehensive youth unemployment measures. Now, the first was in July 2015, and an enhanced version was released last April. But contrary to expectations, the number of young Koreans who have actually given up on looking for jobs has risen. If you look at the plans laid out today, they too are said to not really be on the same page with what many young Koreans are hoping for. As of February, the youth unemployment rate was at 12.3% for those aged 15 to 29. And at the same time, the employment rate of those in their 20s, in contrast to other age groups, is shrinking, posting a fall of 0.5 percentage point on year last month.
These new plans aren't exactly in line with some of the issues the youth job market is facing at the moment. For one, the level of infrastructure for those starting up a business in Korea is weaker than that of other countries, making it less attractive. So focusing on those starting up businesses is pretty off point.
So is the expert saying that the measures will not be effective?
Well, to be exact, he said these plans are more or less similar to what we've already seen.
All right. So then, I mean, what kind of policies do we need to actually see these conditions improve?
Of course, some actions are better than none, but the biggest criticism is that these measures are not addressing the fundamental issues that we're facing. To get to the bottom of ever-rising youth unemployment issues, it takes structural reforms from multiple angles, as this professor who has monitored the country's job market for many years says.
On the government level, all related ministries should help tackle the issue from multiple sides. The Labor Ministry, the Commerce Ministry, and the Finance Ministry should reach out across all levels of society and help create jobs that can accommodate all needs. That, of course, will take time, especially when there isn't a control tower in place. But it takes multiple steps to get to where we need to be.
And on top of that, cooperation from the private sector is a must, as the government alone cannot pump out jobs. Something interesting he pointed out from the interview today was that the way Korean companies hire. One of the reasons more college graduates are vying to apply for large conglomerates is because of the high starting salary. The average salary for Koreans working at large companies starts at $34,353. Considering that being the average, he says the firms could lower the salary of individuals and hire more people instead.
And of course, it's hiring season right here in Korea. And of course, many are probably hoping to get into the large firms. But how are things looking on that front?
As you said, most conglomerates in Korea hire twice a year. And as you said, this is one of the first periods of the two being held annually. And many large firms have already started their hiring processes. Conglomerates like Samsung Group, LG, SK, and had already begun the process of receiving applications. And this is also in time for post-graduation season when many young college graduates are looking to start a new chapter of their lives, with many applying for these jobs. But as you may expect, things are not as what they used to be in terms of the number of open slots. For one, 4 of Samsung Group's companies, which are in shipbuilding, engineering, the credit card business, and construction, all of which are stock market listed firms, are not hiring this year. And that is based on the business performance of each of those firms. Nonetheless, the group reportedly said it will keep its new hire numbers at around 14,000 this year. And Lotte Group said it will hire some 1,150 new employees. That's including the interns who have the potential of becoming permanent workers. And the list goes on, but we should also keep in mind that this is the year that many of the conglomerates have hinted they're not expecting strong business performance considering the economic circumstances. And on top of that, the political turmoil that roiled the country had extended to some of the conglomerates, dragging down the business sentiment further.
So it looks like job seekers here in Korea will face harsher conditions for the time being.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism has released a report showing the impact of Beijing's group travel bans on Korea so far. It shows some 439,000 would-be travelers have canceled their trips in the months of March and April, handing a financial blow of $13.7 million in lost sales. Duty-free sales in the 4-day period since March 15th, when the travel ban came into effect, registered a dip of 12% on year, with forecasts putting Chinese purchases at 29% less. But overall inbound travelers, excluding those from mainland China, rose above the average growth in the first 19 days of March, with many coming from Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Southeast Asian countries. And with that, the Korean government will be extending a helping hand to Korea's tourism industry, reeling from China's economic retaliation over THAAD. Meanwhile, a separate report shows that the Korean economy could suffer tens of billions of dollars in losses if the diplomatic dispute escalates. Our Kim Min-ji has this report.
The Korean government is vowed to step up support for the country's tourism industry, which has been hit by China's apparent retaliation against the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system on the Korean peninsula.
We will try to ease the acute difficulties Korea's tourism industry is facing due to China's retaliatory actions and work to revamp the sector, which is heavily reliant on Chinese tourists.
The government will set aside some $420 million in funds and guarantees for the tourism sector and provide additional support to companies that maintain their workforce instead of laying off employees. It will also work to bring in tourists from other countries by issuing electronic visas for tour groups from Southeast Asia and establishing a platform for disseminating information and promotions to attract individual tourists. The Korean economy could face losses of some $20 billion should China step up further retaliatory action. The state-run Korea Development Bank pointed to the cosmetics industry, duty-free shops, and tourism as the most vulnerable sectors. It says cosmetics companies are expected to see losses of over $1.4 billion, duty-free shops about $5.3 billion, while the tourism sector could see its revenue drop by almost $6.4 billion. Beijing has already imposed a slew of unofficial sanctions, including suspensions on Korean retail stores operating in China, as well as banning group tour packages to Korea. China has also made imports of Korean cosmetics, air purifiers, and bidets more difficult.
If the dispute drags on, retaliatory measures will only escalate. In terms of Korea's travel balance, thanks to China, it was able to narrow its deficit. So if tourists decline, the deficit will increase, and it will also have ripple effects on other businesses that were created or fostered to meet the demands of Chinese tourists several years ago.
While it remains to be seen which path China decides to take, experts say given Beijing's hardline approach to Japan and Taiwan over similar disputes in the past, its retaliatory actions against Korea could continue for some time. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
And companies are also looking for ways to minimize the impact, especially duty-free store operators who are turning their eyes elsewhere to make up for the sagging numbers in Chinese visitors. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
If before it was all about attracting Chinese customers, now the focus is on diversification. With retaliatory measures from China having started to take a heavy toll on the country's duty-free sector, companies are now looking beyond Chinese customers who used to make up roughly 70% of their sales. First, eyes are on the Middle East. Hanwha Group's Galleria Duty Free 63 signed contracts with 2 Korean travel agencies that cater to clients from the Middle East and now have 4 high-end restaurants in the building, which are all halal certified by Korea Tourism Organization. It has also signed MOUs with 2 hospitals in Seoul to jointly develop medical tourism products. Southeast Asia is also seen as a market with high potential. While the proportion of travelers from this region is still significantly less than that of China, what's notable is the rate of increase. Compared to 2011 figures, tourists coming from Southeast Asian countries like the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia saw a big boost last year. Prompted by this, Galleria Duty Free has signed contracts with nearly 80 Korean travel agencies that have a focus on Southeast Asia, while Shinsegae has established ties with Air Asia Group, the largest airline in Malaysia, to develop tour itineraries and promotions for their passengers. The government says it will also increase its promotional spending budget on attracting tourists from Southeast Asia and expand tourism infrastructure for Muslim visitors. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Korean shares were the most bought stocks by foreigners among emerging markets this year. According to brokerage house Yuanta Securities, foreign net buying came to over $4.6 billion as of last Friday, the highest among 8 emerging economies. Analysts attribute the Buy Korea trend to the country's strong economic fundamentals in comparison to other emerging markets, as well as the improved earnings of major companies like Samsung Electronics. India was second on the list at $4.2 billion, followed by Taiwan and Brazil. LG's latest G6 smartphone has won certification from the U.S. Department of Defense for durability, making it a combat-ready smartphone. Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency reported Wednesday that the new gadget was certified last week after it passed 14 tests conducted by Maryland Electrical Testing. The certification includes tests on temperature, pressure, thermal shock, and more. Its certified durability may be a reason why the gadget rose to the top of the Korean market just a week after its launch. According to local market researcher Atlas Research on Wednesday, LG saw its market share jump by nearly 9% to 23% in the week from March 9th to 15th. The G6 will be available in the United States in the first week of April. While M&As are generally viewed as the business of conglomerates, startups here in Korea are beginning to change that mindset. Recently, a couple of homegrown ventures have been making news by acquiring overseas competitors. Our Eunice Kim has the story.
Welcome to Buzzville, a Korean startup that offers a lock screen advertising platform on its members' smartphones. The venture, in its 4th year, recently succeeded in acquiring SlideJoy, its #1 competitor in the United States.
I believe we can grow faster working in tandem with acquired companies, even beyond the U.S. market. Partnering with SlideJoy's outstanding developers and talent will speed things up.
On the education front, Korean startup ST Unitas made news last month when it reached a deal to acquire U.S. test prep powerhouse, the Princeton Review. The move carves out a path to the U.S. market for Korea's private education giant that nurtures a dream of leading the world's online education content. But being a lesser-known startup born in 2010 came with its challenges.
Not only were we a Korean company approaching a well-known U.S. brand, we were also a venture.
As such hard-fought success stories begin to surface one by one, the survival rate of these companies are ticking up too. In 2013, the likelihood a startup would survive 3 years sat at 41%. But 1 year later, it pushed up 36 percentage points to reach 77%.
The moment a product or service is introduced, companies face global competition. So from the beginning, developers and startups need to have a systematic strategy with the global market in mind.
The government is said to be preparing support for startup companies preparing to go abroad, be it a step-by-step model toward commercialization or expanded help to attract initial investment. Consultation on attracting financing, public relations, and legal advice are said to be crafted according to the unique attributes of each country. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.